All right, KMR, we're all about that Brap. We're going to get right into it. We were talking about rotary myths the other day, and we jumped into the apex seal. It's not the apex seal's fault, generally, that it breaks. So as we talked about that, somebody brought up the fact that the FD3S, the beloved, the iconic, the amazing, this is my Batmobile version, the Fast and the Furious, loved and just recognized FD3S, you know what? It might not be reliable. Maybe the FD3S is part of what gave rotary engines the bad name, the bad rap that they have online or throughout the automotive industry today. So we're going to talk about it. Let's jump into it. So the FD3S in itself, I'm going to make the statement, my argument is that they're actually reliable. The engine package, the car, the chassis, Mazda did an amazing job at the time developing a race car for the street. That's how we ended up with such a iconic passage. I've said it before, Mazda's goal was to bring the RX7 to FIA racing, so they had to have an homologated chassis, meaning the car had to be available to the public and had to be available in a, I don't remember what the minimum run was, but Mazda basically had to bring a car to the world that you could buy, that they could also race. And that's how we ended up with the FD3S. So inherently, it's chassis configuration, engine placement, the whole package was built around the concept of performance. It also had to be reliable. And again, there's always a little bit of that truth within the myth. So how did we end up with a lot of people saying the FD3S is not reliable? All right, so the first thing that always comes to mind is everybody blames the apex seal. Yes, when you modified an FD3S RX7, especially in the 90s, the early 2000s, before we had good aftermarket ECU support, they were very easy to blow up. My argument is that in itself did not mean they were unreliable. That meant the owner, the consumer, was making unreliable and bad judgment calls to their own car. Because if you left an FD3S alone, if you didn't add an intake, if you didn't add a catback, you just drove it the way it was, they were very reliable. Over about 18 years of working at Mazda Tricks and then another 6 to 8 on my own, I very rarely saw a bone stock FD3S just catastrophically fail on its own. It just really didn't happen. The things that did happen were coolant system failures, meaning after a long period of ownership, if the coolant system was neglected, just like most cars, a small radiator leak or a thermostat malfunction could easily toast a motor. The thing about the FD3S RX7 is it was really pushing the limits of what was out there. A 1.3 liter engine, twin turbo from the factory, almost 300 horsepower. This was some pretty big math going on, and a very, very small displacement engine package size. Now, horsepower means heat, so these cars had to have ample cooling. They had to have their cooling system functioning and working properly. If anything sprung a leak, the motor overheated once, you could easily toast it. It wasn't like an old Chevy 350 where you could overheat it a bunch of times and it was fine. No. 1.3 liter rotary engine, aluminum, cast iron, turbocharging. Nope, one big cooling failure and you were done. Now that did not mean the car was unreliable. That did not mean the FD3S was reliable. That just meant consumers and owners were neglecting their cooling systems. That's just bad ownership. Same thing when it came to detonation. It was pretty easy to slap an intake, a catback, maybe not get good octane of fuel, and detonate your motor. Inherently, there wasn't a lot of protection, and that went with any boosted or high-performance cars back in the 90s. So it really was up to the owner to make sure they were operating the car within its proper specifications. Yes, it was easy to break an apex seal. Yes, they overheated. But with a good owner, good maintenance, between Mazda Tricks and KMR, Racing Beat, a lot of other reputable rotary shops we saw a lot of FD3S cars, engines, and chassis go over 100,000 miles. I would say the average of the FD3S was more around 80,000 miles, with the upper end seeing a few go over 150,000 miles. That may not be your average Honda Civic or your small block Chevy 350, but again, the motor is neither of those as well. This is a very specific package that does require some specific maintenance and ownership. And another killer, really, when it came to rotaries in general, and we'll have to get into this myth later on, is just premix. If an owner did premix, that helped with the longevity of their FD3S. And if proper maintenance occurred to their metering pump system, regular oil changes, not overheating the oil, those could all play into the fact of the lifespan of the motor. So I'd like to just state it that I do not, in my opinion, as a rotary engine builder and rotary enthusiast, just blame the FD3S. These were amazing cars. These were iconic cars. They rivaled some of our favorites, the Supras, the Skylines, and if you get into European stuff, I mean, these were Ferrari killers, Porsche killers. But with that type of package, it didn't mean you could treat it like your average day-to-day driver. It did require an owner that wanted to maintenance it, that wanted to love it, wanted to love it. And also, when it came to the performance modification side, understood that there had to be a balance to the upgrades. If you were going to add an intake, if you were going to go to an aftermarket turbo, if you were going to even add something as simple as an exhaust system, a lot of the times that meant you had to up fuel delivery, up injector size, retune. Potentially the whole balance of your drivetrain needed adjustment. So I hope that helps. I apologize, my video editor is on the fritz, so you just get to stare at this engine bay through the video. Hopefully future videos I'll be able to sub cool photos or neat stuff back in. But I thought it was an interesting topic, especially just jumping to it after the apex seals, and I believe it was one of the comments on that. Are apex seals a problem kind of myth that got the response for this? Because I don't believe the FD3S is unreliable. I believe they're a very reliable, very tightly strung sports car that definitely requires maintenance if you own it, that can provide a lot of enjoyment and a lot of fun if properly taken care of. And I'd love to know your thoughts. I mean, I'm sure some people will not agree. I'm sure some people will have myths to share. And it's just all part of the fun of the channel. We like to talk the Brap. You know I love those rotaries. And now I got to get back to work. So we're going to Brap on out of here. That's it. Turbos and Braps.